The great hall of the Silverpine Pack was full that night. Every chair was taken, and even the walls were lined with people who had come to watch. Elira Vance stood alone, in the center of the room, her hands folded in front of her, trying to keep them from shaking. Marcus Thorne stood a few steps away from her. He was the pack's beta, tall and confident, dressed in a fine gray coat that made him look like he belonged on a throne rather than beside one. A year ago, the moon goddess had marked them as mates. Elira had believed, foolishly perhaps, that this meant something lasting. But standing there now, she could see the truth in his eyes. He was embarrassed by her. "I reject you, Elira Vance, as my mate," Marcus said, his voice loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "You are an Omega. You have no strength, no rank, and no place beside a future Alpha. I release you from our bond." A wave of murmurs passed through the crowd. Some looked at Elira with pity. Others looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. Nobody spoke up for her. Nobody ever did. Elira felt her chest tighten, but she did not cry. She had promised herself she would not give any of them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She simply nodded once, turned, and walked out of the hall with her head held as high as she could manage. By the next morning, the pack elders had already decided her fate. She was to leave the main territory and live at the old cabin near the eastern border, a place so far from the pack houses that most young wolves had never even seen it. It was not officially called banishment. They called it a fresh start, a place where she could not embarrass the pack with her presence. But everyone understood what it truly meant. The cabin was small and worn down, with a roof that leaked in 3 places and a door that did not close all the way. Elira spent her first days there simply trying to make it livable. She patched the roof with old wood she found in the shed. She swept years of dust from the floor. She told herself that this quiet, lonely place was better than staying somewhere she was not wanted. At night, the forest around the cabin came alive with sound. Owls called from the trees, and the wind moved through the branches like a slow breath. Elira found comfort in the silence in a strange way. Nobody watched her here. Nobody whispered about her. She was simply herself, alone but free of judgment. It was on the 7th night, while she was carrying a bucket of water from the well, that she first saw him. At the edge of the tree line, half hidden by shadow, lay a wolf. He was enormous, far larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with fur so pale it looked silver under the moonlight. Blood matted his side, and his breathing came in shallow, uneven bursts. His eyes, when they opened and found hers, were a deep, striking gold. Elira's first instinct was fear. A wolf that size could easily be dangerous, especially one that was wounded and desperate. But something about the way he looked at her, tired and pained rather than threatening, made her lower the bucket instead of running. "You're hurt," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. The wolf did not move, but he did not growl either. He simply watched her, his sides rising and falling with effort. Elira thought of every warning she had ever heard about strange wolves in the woods. Then she thought about how she had been treated by her own pack, people who were supposed to protect her, and she found she trusted this silent, wounded creature more than she trusted them. She went inside, brought out a strip of dried meat from her small store of food, and set it a short distance from him. Then she stepped back and waited. It took a long moment before the wolf moved. Slowly, carefully, he dragged himself toward the meat and ate. When he finished, he looked at her again, and something in his gaze felt almost like gratitude. "I'll bring more tomorrow," Elira whispered. "Just stay safe until then." She did not know why she made that promise. She only knew that she meant it. What Elira did not know was that the wolf lying in the shadows was not an ordinary stray. He was Kael Draven, Alpha King of the 9 territories, ruler over every pack in the land, including her own. Weeks earlier, he had been poisoned by a rare herb during a peace summit, a poison meant to trap him permanently in wolf form and weaken him until his enemies could finish what they started. He had barely escaped with his life, shifting into his wolf to run from the summit grounds, and he had been hiding and healing ever since, unable to change back to human form until the poison left his body. He could not speak. He could not explain who he was. All he could do was watch this strange, gentle woman offer him food and kindness, with no idea that she was feeding a king. The next night, Illyra returned to the same spot with more food. The wolf was waiting for her, a little stronger than before. She sat a respectful distance away and talked to him while he ate, the way some people talk to themselves just to fill the silence. "My name is Illyra," she said. "I don't suppose you care, but it feels strange not to introduce myself." She smiled faintly. "I used to belong to the Silverpine Pack. Not anymore, I suppose. My mate rejected me in front of everyone, said I wasn't strong enough to stand beside him." She looked down at her hands. "Maybe he's right, I don't know, but it still hurt." The wolf's ears twitched, and he shifted his body slightly closer to her, as if he were listening. "You're a good listener," Illyra said with a small laugh. "Better than most people I know." From that night on, it became a ritual. Every evening, once her small chores at the cabin were done, Illyra would walk to the tree line with food and sometimes water, and the wolf would be there waiting. She began cleaning his wounds with herbs she remembered from her mother's teachings, pressing soft cloths against torn fur with careful hands. The wolf never once tried to harm her, even when the pain must have been sharp. He simply watched her with those steady gold eyes, as though memorizing every movement she made. Kale found himself looking forward to those visits more than he wanted to admit. In his life as Alpha King, he was surrounded by advisors, guards, and nobles who wanted something from him at every turn. Loyalty in his court often came with conditions. But this woman, who had no idea who he truly was, gave him food and comfort and stories about her day without ever asking for anything in return. She spoke to him about the birds she saw near the cabin, about a fox that kept stealing vegetables from her small garden, about memories of her childhood before she was old enough to understand the weight of pack politics. She never once complained about her exile in a bitter way. She spoke of it with a quiet sadness, but also with a strange kind of peace, as though she had decided to make the best of what she had been given. Weeks passed. Kale's strength slowly returned. His wounds closed, and the poison that had trapped him in wolf form began to weaken its hold. He could feel his human shape waiting just beneath the surface, ready to return once his body was strong enough. Yet he found himself in no hurry. Every night with Illyra felt like the only honest moment in his entire life. One evening, as autumn winds began to turn the leaves gold and red, Illyra sat beside the wolf longer than usual. The fire from a small lantern flickered nearby, casting warm light across the clearing. "I used to think being rejected was the worst thing that could happen to me," she said softly. "But lately, I think it might have saved me. I would have spent my whole life trying to be enough for someone who was never going to see my worth." She reached out, gently resting her hand near the wolf's paw, careful not to overstep. "You, though, you never make me feel like I have to prove anything." The wolf lowered his head, resting it lightly against her hand, and for the first time since his exile began, Kale felt something in his chest loosen, something he had not felt in years. It was not simply gratitude. It was the quiet beginning of love, one built not on rank or bloodline, but on patience, honesty, and small kindnesses given freely. Far from the cabin, in the capital city of the 9 territories, Kale's cousin Celine Draven was busy tightening her grip on power. With the king missing and presumed dead by most of the court, she had convinced key advisors that leadership needed to pass to her for the sake of stability. She spread careful rumors, silenced anyone who asked too many questions, and prepared to formally claim the throne. Her plan had nearly worked perfectly, except for one problem. The king was not dead. He was healing, quietly, in a forest cabin, fed each night by an Omega, who thought she was simply being kind to a stray. On a cold night 3 months after Illyra first found him, Kale felt the poison finally release its final hold on his body. Strength surged through him fully for the first time since the attack. He rose to his feet as the wolf, standing taller and steadier than he had in a long while, and as Illyra watched in stunned silence, his form began to shift. Fur gave way to skin. His body reshaped itself with the practiced ease of a shift long delayed, until a tall man stood where the wolf had been, silver hair falling across his forehead, his eyes still the same striking gold. He wore no shirt, only the torn remains of the cloth that had once covered him in wolf form, but his presence filled the small clearing entirely. Illyra stumbled back, her heart pounding. Who Who are you? Cale raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. My name is Cale Draven, he said, his voice deep and steady. I am the Alpha King of the 9 territories, and you, Alira, saved my life every single night for the past 3 months. For a moment, Alira could not speak. Fear, disbelief, and confusion tangled together inside her. She had spoken so openly to him, believing he could not understand a single word. Now she realized he had heard everything, every private thought, every quiet confession. I should go, she whispered, turning to leave, embarrassment burning in her chest. Wait, Cale said gently, stepping forward but keeping his distance, careful not to frighten her further. Please, I never once judged you for the things you shared with me. If anything, they were the most honest words anyone has spoken to me in years. He paused, searching for the right words. I was poisoned by someone close to my throne. I have spent months as a wolf, hiding, healing, and honestly, dying a little more each day from loneliness, until you found me. Alira turned back slowly, studying his face for any sign of deception, but found only sincerity. You're really the king? I am, Cale said, and you are the reason I am alive to say so. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of wind moving through the trees. I don't understand why you're telling me this, Alira finally said. I'm nobody, an Omega who was rejected by her own mate. What use could I possibly be to a king? Cale took a careful step closer. You were never nobody, Alira. Rank never determined your worth. Not to me. You fed a wounded stray with nothing to gain, night after night, expecting nothing in return. That kind of heart is rare in my world, rarer than any crown. Alira felt tears rise unexpectedly, tears she had refused to shed even during her public rejection. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything tonight, Cale said gently, but I would like you to return with me to the capital, not as someone who owes me anything, but as someone I have come to care for deeply. There are people there who need to answer for what they did to me, and I would very much like you by my side when I face them. Over the following days, Alira slowly agreed, still uncertain, but no longer afraid. Cale sent word ahead through a trusted messenger, and together they traveled back toward the capital, where his sudden return caused shock throughout the 9 territories. Celine's plans collapsed the moment his living presence was confirmed. Advisors who had begun supporting her claim quickly reversed their positions, and the truth of her betrayal came to light through careful investigation, including proof of the poison used against him. In the same great hall where Alira had once been publicly rejected, now standing far from Silverpine territory but with representatives from every pack present, Cale addressed the gathered crowd. He spoke of loyalty, of true strength, and of a lesson he had learned not from his advisors or his warriors, but from a woman who had shown him kindness, expecting nothing in return. I stand before you healed and alive because of Alira Vance, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the hall. She is not weak, she is not unworthy, she is the strongest person I have ever known, and I intend to make her my Luna, my mate, and my queen. Alira stood beside him, her hand in his, feeling something she had almost forgotten how to feel, belonging. Marcus Thorne, present among the visiting delegates, stood frozen in the crowd, his earlier words about her weakness echoing hollow and foolish now. Celine, exposed and disgraced, was led away under guard, her ambitions ending in the same kind of exile she had once tried to force upon the true king. As the hall slowly emptied and quiet returned, Cale turned to Alira, his gold eyes soft in a way few had ever seen. Thank you, he said simply, for feeding a stray who turned out to be a king. Alira smiled, the first truly light smile she had felt in a long time. I would have fed you either way, she said, king or not. And as the moonlight fell over the capital that night, Alira Vance, once cast aside as unworthy, stood beside the Alpha King, not because of rank or fate, but because of the simple, unshakable kindness that had never asked for anything in return.